Thank you. Thank you to inviting me to this group. So I'm Olivier Marlet, and I will present you a semantic web platform for interoperable archaeological data called OpenArcheo. This is a collaborative work with Béatrice Marcoff, Xavier Rodier, and Thomas Francard. Since 2013, the MASA Consortium, Mémoire des archéologues et des sites archéologiques of the French Very Large Research Infrastructure Humanium, has assisted archaeologists in digitizing and making available their excavations archives. The objective is to make these archaeological datasets interoperable by following the precepts of the FAIR principles. First steps was online availability and usability of datasets. Second step was to make them interoperable, which requires the shared communication layer. For this purpose, the MASA Consortium shows the standard ontology Psyduck CRM dedicated to the modeling of cultural heritage. This ontology is increasingly adopted by large libraries such as the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, by museums like the British Museum, for example, and of course in European projects like ARIADNE+. In the context of ARIADNE+, the MASA Consortium is engaged to share its datasets together with OpenArcheo as an experimental tool, which have been devised for exploiting them. More and more projects are mapped older data sets to the Psyduck CRM for interoperability purposes. It's now necessary to have intuitive search tools to explore these interconnected datasets. The MASA Consortium proposes that OpenArcheo be this tool for the archaeological community. It provides an online interface for querying several archaeological datasets, meeting the needs of a user-friendly query interface, the use of external thesauri, and API for web services. Thus, OpenArcheo is a way for exploring data from distributed autonomous data providers without duplicating all data by locally loading it. OpenArcheo is developed by the Laboratoire Archéologie et Territoire with the Sparner Company for the consortium MASA. Since the Psyduck CRM is dedicated to heritage data, its model happens to be rather well adapted for modeling most of our data. In addition, the team developing the Psyduck working in close collaboration with archaeologists. Several extensions have been developed directly related to archaeology. The CRM Archeo, especially models concepts related to the archaeological fieldwork, and the CRM BA, specifically models archaeological buildings. Thanks to the Psyduck and its extensions, we have an ontology perfectly adapted to the archaeology domain. However, the Psyduck is a complex structuring of entities and properties that is not necessary to exploit in its entirety to model the archaeological data. To simplify its use, we have formalized a model extracted directly from the Psyduck and its extensions, but we keep only what can be useful for the implementation of triple store for archaeology. The generic data models extracted from the Psyduck CRM and its extensions establishes the minimum elements that can be found in most archaeological datasets, even at different scales. This model is a selection of a few Psyduck CRM, CRM Science, and CRM Archeo entities and properties that are necessary and sufficient for representing the core of excavation data. It's important to notice that our objective is to federate several autonomous datasets, and the OpenArcheo platform is not intended to provide access to all specific elements of each corpus. It's therefore not necessary to perform a completely detailed mapping of each dataset to the Psyduck CRM ecosystem. Its purpose is to answer fairly simple queries and to provide in the answers the URLs to access the detailed records in each data source. If a source handles specific issues, It's by switching from the results given by OpenArcheo to the online database of this source that the researcher is able to query the specificities more accurately. Thus, the queries concern a general level that is common to most archaeological datasets. This level concerns the site, its location, the person in charge of the operation, the structures, features, walls, burials, stratigraphic units, and artifacts. For each of these items, attention has been paid to standard description, possible data, and related documentation. Following the spirit of Psyduck CRM, the central entities is the event of encountering or excavating a site, and this is done under the responsibility of a person. As usual in the Psyduck CRM, each entity is associated with an identifier, a type, preferably from a standard repository, and possibly an appellation. The identifier is generally the inventory number assigned during recording and provides a unique identifier in the datasets. In the case where a permanent identifier has not yet been deployed to identify an online research, ARC or UNDER, it's this record identifier that can be used to access the resource. Each of these entities is also linked to a dating model and a documentation model. For the dating model, we should provide information on the period of use of the element, excavation, site, artifact. A free date is indicated, a time appellation, which may be a number or a string. This literal date corresponds to the information as it was recorded, and in the 18th century, for example. This period, sometimes fuzzy, is also specified by a numeric range more suitable for a computer in the form of two separated records, from 775 to 800 to match with the previous example. For the documentation model, the aim is to link the documentation to these elementary archaeological elements: photographs, field drawings, recording sheets, archive documents, bibliographical references, operating report, and so on. This documentation may itself be dated and associated with an author. The mapping of archaeological databases to Psyduck CRM is a prerequisite for their interoperability. Many tools are currently available to perform this operation depending on the existing database format. The first dataset to integrate OpenArcheo is ARSOL, the Archives du Sol, the Laboratoire Archéologie et Territoire Relational Database for excavation data management and research, created in 1990 and available online since 2014. The ICERAM database, French research network on medieval and modern pottery, and Les Chroniques, Archaeological Journal of the French School of Athens, database, are also being mapped. For ARSOL, ICERAM, and Chroniques, we use OnTop, an ontology-based data access tool designed at the University of Bolzano. It's a Prodigy plugin to realize the mappings. Those mappings can be used either to directly query the Psyduck ontology and get results from the connected relational database, or to exploit the relational database into an RDF graph of Psyduck CRM instances. The second type of datasets are corpuses stored in XML format. In XML format, we worked on ARBA, the Atlas of Rural Settlements in Ancient Beauce, en France, and la MOM, Maison de l'Orient de la Méditerranée in Lyon, France, works on the mapping of excavations of the Kition Pervodia site in Cyprus. For this other dataset, we use the Mapping Memory Manager, the online visual application provided by Salesforce teams in Archaeological to map at an XML dataset to the Psyduck CRM. To bring data to the semantic web and ensure its interoperability, we encourage data providers of the OpenArcheo platform to use standard compliant repositories and used for archaeological community. For all typology, type of operation, type of structure, type of stratigraphic unit, artifact materials, we use the multilingual thesaurus subject of the Pactol, the French thesaurus, multilingual French thesaurus, which in the ISO standard, managed by the Frantic Network, increasingly used by French archaeologists. As part of the European ARIADNE program, a part of the Pactol's thesauri are aligned with the controlled vocabulary of the Getty Museum Art and Architecture thesaurus, and the Pactol considers integrating the backbone thesaurus from the DARIA infrastructure. The MASA Consortium participated in the development of OpenTeso, the online platform for managing thesauri, including Pactols, which you can see at the screen. In addition, OpenTeso offers web services to exploit the Pactols in the third-party applications. A web application has been implemented within the MASA Consortium to help align unstructured or poorly structured vocabularies with a standardized thesaurus. The MASA Consortium also funded the development of Termline application. This tool enables the alignment of a dataset vocabulary with a repository, here the Pactols, while keeping the state of progress of this alignment work. Termline provides an output SCOS file of the alignment vocabulary. In addition, it also enables to submit to Pactol's thesaurus administrators new concepts to improve the repository. In order to ensure the interoperability of vocabularies, we favor the association of permanent identifier like ARChandle with the aligned terms. This is the case for vocabularies aligned with Pactols, but also for chronological periods that we align with the ARIADNE thesaurus submitted in Periodo, and for localization within a federated search platform such as OpenArcheo. It does not seem relevant to us to localize the elements more precisely than the site level. In the case of GeoName, ARC identifier is not provided, but only URI, with a number identifying the geographical entities. The case of the authors, in particular, we have a whole range of solutions, but none of them is totally satisfying. The Virtual International Authority file, the VIAF, we found all the authors from Julius Caesar to today's authors, but sometimes with duplicates because it integrates, among other, IDREF, but it does not merge identical identifier from the different integrated repositories. We've got in French AL. It's a French directory of scientific articles. Takes into account only the authors having published current. We will not find Julius Caesar as authors, and essentially French. We can use ORCID, the international repository, but fed only by individual initiative. Each researcher must create an ARCID account and therefore cannot take into account dead authors. So Julius Caesar, for example, will not have an ARCID. And we can use the Wikidata or Wikipedia for known authors. Among these repositories, VIAF takes into account groups of our legal entities, CNRS, Inwrap, the French government, which IDEAL does not do. While waiting for a true single repository answering all the situations, old authors, current authors, without publication, not famous, it's necessary to combine the existing solutions according to the corpus to be treated. Once the corpuses are ready, we can deposit them in the GraphDB triple store to feed OpenArcheo. We devised the interfaces for applications, for administrators, and for end users. OpenArcheo end users are archaeologists, whether researchers are amateur alike, that is, people who know what an excavation is. For such people, we soon realized that the same generic model we built as a guide for mapping excavation data to the Psyduck CRM should be the right conceptual model for guiding the querying of this data. The user-friendly interface provides a list of available data sources to start with. The user selects the one he wants to query. In our prototype, we currently have only a few data sources, but others are in preparation, such as Kityon and the Chronique, and we are open to any submissions to increase the resources and improve in OpenArcheo. We devised the intuitive visual query interface of OpenArcheo based on the generic model, and by following the main visual guidelines chosen by ResearchSpace, to the best of our knowledge, the only existing comparable visual querying tool. ResearchSpace is developed by at the British Museum on the basis of Psyduck CRM, with the aim to connecting researchers, data, and practices. Inspired by this model, Sparner Company developed for MASA Sparnatural. How does it work? A system of icons has been set up to modify the main components of the archaeological data: the site, the operation manager, the archaeological structure, the archaeological features, the wall, burials, stratigraphic unit, and archaeological artifacts. We start by selecting the entity for which we want to get an answer. Here, I'm interested in burials, for example. Then, OpenArcheo suggests either questioning directly the criteria of these burials as its dating, or investigating entities directly related to the burial entities. When users wish to connect two elements, burials or site, for example, the interface automatically suggests the available relationships between these two entities. Here, founded. We can then either search for an entity by its appellation, or this enables users to formulate their request in a simple way without having to know either the entities and properties of Psyduck CRM or the structure of the system. We can then either search for an entity by its appellation or continue to associate other entities. The appellation share is done by dynamic drop-down list of available occurrences. Here I have selected the archaeological site of Marmoutier, but I can also decide to focus our question on a criterion carried by another entity. Here I'm interested in persons who have been in charge of the excavation. And the person I'm especially interested is Elizabeth Lawrence. Well, that's it. My request is built. It looks like a sentence that is readable or understandable by an archaeologist or even by ordinary people. The specular query that corresponds to the sentences visually built by users are automatically computed. Thus, the user does not need to know the underlying model of the specular query language. The result of the query can be displayed in several ways. Here, a table giving the URI linking to the online resource, but it could be a chart or a map. By clicking on the URI on the result, the user opens the online page of the resource and can consult its details and specificities. Here's the burial number 2 from the excavation of Marmoutier, carried out by Elizabeth Lawrence. Excuse me. OpenArcheo is able to integrate several external thesauri that are useful for querying excavation datasets. Currently, it's enables users to formulate their queries with the vocabulary collected in the Pactol's thesaurus. It's also possible to use GeoName for special research or Periodo for temporal researches, as shown in these two examples. enabling end users to explore datasets integrated with OpenArcheo is a primary importance. To go further, the linked Open Data Cloud currently exists for developers to build innovative applications based on the published linked datasets. The full potential of Psyduck CRM integrating capabilities is not necessarily limited to the visual querying provided by OpenArcheo. And to make it enabled in other ways by everyone, we also provide tools for applications to query the datasets via the integrated access point implemented in by OpenArcheo. In this way, programs in Java, PHP, Python, and so on can use OpenArcheo Sparkle's endpoint to automatically compute statistics on the participating datasets, or verifying periodically the updates in datasets, and more generally perform any queries that could be built in the user interface. As an example for user, we provide many simple queries. We can see on the side of the screen that can be processed through the interface. So OpenArcheo enables experienced users to interactively explore the datasets with their own Sparkle queries. The system provides users with several kinds of visualization tools for the results they get from their queries. And the standard visualization is a table result, but it can be, as I said, geolocalized format or statistical views. Sparner has also set up an online service called the Shackle to control the quality of tupled file and to validate or not its publication based on the rules established by the OpenArcheo data model. The results returned by the validator enable to analyze either error directly related to the mapping, in which case the mappings in question must be corrected, or errors inherent to the dataset, could be typos, broken links between records, empty records, and so on. In addition to being able to validate all the triplets produced, Shackle therefore provides in-depth feedback in the content of the dataset itself, and also the detection of inconsistencies or input errors that leading to improvements of the dataset. OpenArcheo is designed to be extendable and reusable in other contexts with the Sparner module, the Sparner natural module. It has the advantage of being flexible. In particular, it's easy to extend the system with new data providers. In the near future, we plan to adapt and extend it to the European level as part of ARIADNE+, and perhaps tomorrow with your dataset, if you are interested in. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. It was a very impressive presentation about a very impressive project. So I guess we can open the floor for questions at this point.
I might have a question about the modeling of chronique des fouilles to OpenArcheo. Does the model is the model for chronique des fouilles mapped directly on the model that you showed, or are there differences?
No. Bruno Morandier use this model and use on top to make all the mappings with this model.
I have a question, and it might be a strange question, but it's a question dear to my heart. How did you convince the archaeologists to cooperate with you and allow modeling their data in Psyduck CRM using semantics and this and that? Because in my experience, and I'm an archaeologist myself and a fan of Psyduck CRM, whenever I approach an archaeologist with words like semantics, Psyduck CRM, ontology, They just try to find the nearest exit and then they run away. And they say, we don't have time, it's going to slow everything down, I'm not going to allow my data to be used. How did you manage this in France?
Yes, it's a difficult, it's a real difficulties. We won't convince all the archaeologists, it's sure. But we can convince with OpenArcheo. We can convince most of archaeologists which have interest a little bit to the semantic web, and it's enough now for the moment, because we have to help them to make this mapping. And it's a long time. And if there were too many archaeologists, it wouldn't be possible for us.
That's true. Well, it's amazing for even for starters.
I have a kind of a continuation question for that one. Mm-hmm. Because it's just a very practical answer. So what is the kind of a time scale that you've been operating? And how big? How many are you? Is this a one man enterprise, or how is it? Because this must be quite true, and I do totally agree with this that there is a difficulty there in convincing archaeologists for the usefulness for everyone and so on and so forth. But once you have something that you can show that, hey, look. This is how it works. This is how it would be beneficial for you and for the others. But that takes energy and resources to be able to get to that stage where you are now, that you can say that, hey, come on, look. So how long have you been working, and how big is the that you have, and how many are you doing this?
I begin alone from at the beginning of the consortium MASA. I was alone to work on this. And now, since a few months, we have someone who can work only on the mapping of datasets with us, because I don't only do that all day long. So, but now we've got someone who worked all day long on mappings for the MASA Consortium.
This was really interesting. Thank you very much for the presentation. And I'm on the line with what has already been said. I was thinking that what we as researchers we are in need for good examples and good applications that would be so easy that we just sort of could manage with our stuff without thinking too much about the sort of the infrastructure behind that. But I don't know how that happens, because even if you are using archies, and that should be sort of a quite nice. In fact, it's not that easy. You need to have some kind of a very profound knowledge of semantic web ontology or something, and it just doesn't happen sort of by itself. So I think that what is needed, good examples of sort of a small projects that could be shown as, like, we started from this one, we did this one, we needed this kind of persons to do that kind of stuff for us, and it costs about this amount of money. Because of course, when you apply for funding, you need to apply also funding for the data management.
I think that one of amongst the interesting results of MASA's work is definitely this consideration of the data that's of interest, and then creating this established, documented model, which describes its scope and its function, and gives a way of taking up semantics and Psyduck in particular. I think that's like a very interesting thing, because usually, you know, as you said, one of the problems is just figuring out all of the different aspects of semantics and then deploying them in a tool. So having something like that that's domain specific and is a considered opinion of archaeologists of how to model this aspect of archaeology with Psyduck CRM is really useful. And I was gonna, say that, most projects don't have this, level of development and infrastructure and, so much already achieved. And my question is, another reason that people have skepticism or are not sure if there's a reason to be doing semantic data is because they don't see even the research benefit for them in the end. And so, but what I think is interesting about the level of accomplishment of MASA now is that you're at the point where you can start thinking about corpus, and you could thinking about it in the Athenian context or the Greek context, if we were so advanced or whatever. If we had that machinery, and then the institutes amongst themselves decided to have a focus and say, we want to integrate data of this sort, and the outcome research-wise will be the following: that you will have a uniform access to whatever it be, sites or archaeologists or what have you. Then you'd start making the research point, because it wouldn't be, look, we have fancy tools and we think about data in a complicated way, but it would be, you can come up with a research result that would otherwise would have been much more painful for you to arrive at. So I guess that wasn't the question, but it was it was a projection in my mind of what you could do with your work.
Can I rebound on this? If we have managed already, not we, Olivier and Bruno, have managed to map the basic fields of chronique des fouilles of AG Online to the model that has been built for OpenArcheo, more or less about the Athenian context, more or less most of our projects should be able to relate to this model, because really the model within the Greek context, it will have a sense when several resources will be able to map to the same to this model, and results can come up from the Greek context and not from the French context, which is completely different. But still, in the methodologically speaking, it's interesting to be able to map AG Online to the mapping of the modeling of OpenArcheo the same way as French archaeological context can map to it.
I don't think there's we try to have a really generic model. So yes, when we map any data sets on this model, we lost a lot of information. Specific information is lost, and it's not for us. It's not a problem, because OpenArcheo is just a window to open on these datas, and specificities of the datas will be accessible after by clicking on the when we have it on the results. So we keep on this model a generic this generic model, only the main elements who can be queried to find information, and it could be for big projects or for a small project, we try to orient all the new projects we carry out so that the data produced will integrate OpenArcheo at the end.
Mm-hmm. And did you say that Kitty on Pervodia is going to participate?
Yes, they are working on today.
Ah, brilliant. Okay.
And what is the model that you envision for people interacting with OpenArcheo? I mean, is it basically, you know, if people want to use OpenArcheo, do they contact you and figure out the parameters of doing mapping and the data goes through you, or is it a tool set that they install in their own network and or how do you envision that?
Most of the projects in OpenArcheo are from a member of the MASA Consortium. And after, as I said, when we get new projects now, we try to make the data integrated in the end in OpenArcheo. But now we don't have example of people who not yet who looked OpenArcheo and when they discover it and ask us to integrate their data in the Triple Store.
If I can complete, not yet, but it's we know, we saw that it's coming. Some contact are of some colleagues are interesting because they have saw one presentation of OpenArcheo or they discuss with other colleagues. I think the first step is one of the aims of MASA Consortium is to convince the French community of archaeologists to pass this step. And the first step is to convince to share the data. After we use OpenArcheo mainly with two arguments. First is we need this application, this platform as a proof of concept to show that it's possible. And second is the work of Olivier. We have a very more as possible sample model. And when we talk with colleagues, they don't have to change anything to our own database. It's another layer up down our database, and they don't have to change anything. That's very important because it's for that the model is simple. The aim is to have a model to say Olivier, to share what is interesting to share, not to share all the data of each database.
I have a question, but of course I'm very ignorant about the topic, about the archaeological bureaucracy and bureaucracy of cultural heritage projects in France. But in many countries, sharing the data is not always the decision of the archaeologist or the director of a project. Many countries, including Greece, they have very strong departments who are in charge of excavations and cultural heritage projects and this and that. And usually they have the final say on sharing the data and how much of it can be shared, when it can be shared. Do you guys have in France some sort of governmental bureaucracy who's in charge of things in general, or is it basically, it depends on the project manager or project director?
Yes, go on, Xavier.
In France, we know the bureaucracy. We know very well the bureaucracy. And the French Ministry of Culture is the main... It is the French Ministry of Culture. We have the main difficulty to discuss about data sharing for archaeology. But they are very late in this process, and the Ministry of Culture said after a presentation of Olivier about Open Archeo, they said the representative of the Ministry of Culture said that we are going to speed to. It's not controlled and it's to speed, but we are working on this science 8 years now. We are in contact with the international community, and we have we use the standard, the international standard. But
sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. There is a policy for open science now in France. Science ouverte.
Yes, of course, we are totally included in this dispositif. But the policy of science of open science is mainly from the Ministry of Research, from the CNRS, but not from the Ministry of Culture, and particularly for in the Ministry of Culture about archaeology, because they are late in this dispositif, but in this dynamic. But when some leader project go in this direction, there's no really an obstacle, because the project manager can do what he wants with her data. Some of services from the Ministry of Culture make some application or data repository with many data without the agreement of the ministry, and it's probably in this way we are going. So the ministry know that it can do an answer to all these services, and the need it's very, very present now.
Mm-hmm.
Xavier, I think that was the ministry phoning to tell you were wrong. I think that was the ministry phoning to tell you were wrong.
No.
But there's a little change, because we are working also with Inwrap, which is the greatest organism for archaeologists in France, and we work with them to the mapping of the catalog of reports, of archaeological reports in the national level, to be integrated in the Open Archeo.
Perfect. As the time approaches 12 o'clock here in Athens time, if no one else has a very, very important thing to say, I think we can express our very, very profound gratitude to Monsieur Marlet.
Thank you.
it's actually, for me, it was an amazing example of, as Monsieur Pervodia said, the proof of concept of how this can actually be implemented, and many projects can be interoperable. It actually is the future and the dream of all of us, I guess.
Yeah,
Thank you
brilliant.
very much,
Thank you.
guys.